Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer, and I am joined by Dale Ayres. We both work in the NCI Careers
Hi,
Service.
everyone.
And today we are talking for Grad Ireland about hints and tips for interviews. So we've got about 15 minutes. We're going to fly through a few key pointers on preparing for an interview and then some tips on sort of interview skills when you're in a virtual or face-to-face interview. So to get started, let's talk a little bit about preparation. So I'll hand it over to Dale on four key things that you need to think about when you're preparing for an interview.
Sure, thanks, Jen. So I think one of the main things that you've got to look at is going into an interview prepared. A lot of that is to know about to do with knowing what the job spec is and what is on that job spec and also on your own CV. But the job spec is fairly self-explanatory and we won't go into that. But the four areas you do need to go in to feel confident in that interview and to cover every eventuality that might come up are the four areas of the company, people, job, and you. So the company, you want to obviously know as much as you can about them. Don't just look at their website, but look at news as well. See where they've come up in the news recently and what their latest thing is that they're doing. You don't want to have a conversation where you don't know what's going on. Secondly, the people, research the people that you're interviewing with, research the people that you're conversing with in the emails back and forth as you're trying to arrange your interviews, and make sure you know who is who in what organization. Then the job, obviously you need to know specifics about the job, not just the job spec, but where that job fits into the organization and department. And then of course you, company, people, job, and you need to go in there knowing what your CV says, which sounds stupid, but there's a lot of different people will tailor their CVs to go into a job, and you need to know your own CV back to front to get into that interview and know the questions that could be asked on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you know all of that information, some key things about practicing. So when you're going into an interview stage, it's really important to understand that effectively communicating is about three things. It's about body language, tone of voice, and then the content of what you're actually saying. So body language accounts for about 55% of how we communicate effectively, and tone of voice accounts for about 38%, with only a tiny little bit, which is 7% on the actual content that you've prepared for. So when you're practicing for an interview, there are a few different steps that I would suggest that you take so that you have your content, your tone of voice, and your body language nailed for this. And this would be important for a face-to-face or a virtual interview. So the first thing that I would say is practice your answers. So focus on the content. Are the answers of the questions correct? Do they follow a STAR format if they're a competency question? Do you know your CV inside out? Practice writing all of those things down and then practice saying them aloud. If you can, and if you're confident doing it, go into a bathroom and practice saying your answers in front of a mirror, because then you'll get to see what your body language looks like, whether you have any little tics, do you play with your hair, do you fiddle with an earring, anything like that, that you can cut out quite easily, because those body language things are distractions. The next step that I would suggest, and this is definitely if you've got a bit of time, is record yourself just on your phone, turn it on and record yourself answering the question. When you play it back, turn off the sound. We're not concerned about the content of the answer and we're not concerned about the tone of voice immediately. You're just looking again for your body language. Are you moving your head around too much? Do your eyes tend to wander? Look at those body language elements and then fix them. Record the answer again, and then if you're brave enough, play the volume aloud and listen to your tone of voice. Are you engaging? Are you smiling? Do you sound earnest, passionate, and enthusiastic when you're giving that answer? And then record it again. And in your last recording, think about, is the content good? Do I say a lot? Do I say okay a lot? Do I have weird pauses? Is the content of my story answering the question? Do I have a good tone of voice? And is my body language appropriate for an interview? And those would be the kind of key steps, depending on how much time that you have, I'd go through. But recording yourself is really, really a top trick that I'd highly recommend that you do.
And when you're recording yourself, and you're gonna, and especially this is obviously the case for online interviews, you need to make sure your camera setup is good. It's no good in sort of making sure that you've got a good facial expression if they can't see you properly on the camera, or if they're distracted by things around you. So try your best to make sure, first of all, that your background is fairly neutral. The background I've got behind me, there's not too much. I've got a plant growing on my shoulder, and that's about as distracting as it gets. So try and keep your background fairly neutral. You don't want washing hanging up in the background. You don't want posters or dirty plates or anything. You want it to look kind of professional. Everybody gets you're probably working from home or whatever, but try to make it plain. And also try to make sure if you've got light behind you, like I have here, like a big skylight, you need to make sure that you've got as much light in front of you as you do behind to counterbalance it. Because if I turn these lights off, my face starts to get dim. And depending on how well your camera works on your phone or on your laptop, as it should be when you're on an interview, it can be really different. So make sure, and as well, don't have your camera low. Nobody wants to be looking at your nose. So try and keep it as close to eye level as possible, as much light in the background as possible, and keep your background kind of plain and simple and non-distracting. And also make sure that you dress for the part. You've got to set yourself up like you would for a normal interview. So no t-shirts, shirt and tie at a minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely check your sound. Some computers don't record sound very well. So I have headphones in today because of that exact reason. So make sure that you test that with a friend before you try and go into an online interview. Okay, let's move on. Just so that's the kind of preparation side of things. What in terms, Dale, in terms of just general interviewing, what are some key things to think about when you're actually in an interview itself?
In an interview itself, I would say that whether it's online or in person, I'd say there's two kind of things that I always tell people to do. First of all is to repeat people's names. As soon as you go in and you're introduced to somebody, everybody does this. We're so nervous, and you might end up going having been introduced to somebody and then forget immediately who they are or forget their name, and then for the rest of that interview, you're like, please don't get to the situation where I've got to say your name. So if you repeat their name at least once, but preferably twice, if you repeat their name back to them while you're being introduced, then you're more likely to remember their name, and also they're more likely to pay attention to you. So that's something that's really important, is just repeating the names. It helps you to feel more relaxed in the interview. It helps you to remember their name, and it helps them to pay attention to you. Secondly, the one thing I say to everybody, especially on a Skype interview, you can do this. The only sticker I'll tell people to have by their camera is one that says three things: smile, relax, and make good eye contact. Those are the three things, whether you're in person or on a Skype. Try to make sure that you smile. People don't want to see somebody who's frowning or nervous, that sort of thing. They want to know whether they can work with you, and they want you to seem friendly. So smile, relax, because that will help you to relax, even though it sounds stupid, but saying it will help you. And then making good eye contact. Keeping eye contact with somebody is extremely important, and it helps them to focus their attention on you rather than you looking around. Keep your focus on those people.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I think let's talk a little bit about sort of face-to-face tips. And there's a question that's come in around managing nerves as well. So we'll touch on that for sure. So I think one of the first things, and this will go into the nervousness piece, right, is that when you're in an interview, it's all about becoming personable with the person. And one of the key things that I would always say to students is that when you go into an interview, think about it as an opportunity to build a relationship with somebody, right? The panelists on the other side are interviewing you to see if you're going to be a good fit for them. They've already looked at your CV and screened you out of an awful lot of people, right? So whatever job you're applying to, there are going to be hundreds of graduate applicants. If they've looked at your CV and they like what they see, they're already confident that you can probably do the job that they're looking for. The reason that they're asking you to interview is to see whether you're going to be a fit and to ask you some more in-depth questions about your experience. But for you as the candidate, what's really important to think about is that you are also going to be working with these people for 40 hours a week, right? That this is a job that hopefully you have for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or even longer. So you're going to be working with these people an awful lot. So if you go into an interview thinking this is an opportunity for me to see whether I can build a relationship with these people, then we both know that this job is going to be right, because it's no good just them wanting you. You have to also want to join that company. And I think if you go in a little bit with that mindset, it can kind of calm you down a little bit to think, well, this is their interview because they want to hire me. They've already looked at my CV and they're spending their time to interview me. So this needs to be valuable for me as well as it is for them. If that's kind of maybe again, a little bit difficult for you to think about, or maybe you're not a super extroverted person, I would say, especially for people that are maybe a little bit quieter, it's not always just about being bubbly and super yay. It's about being passionate about what you do, about being well spoken and taking time to think about the answers, right? Because if you're going for a job that you're actually, do you know what, I quiet until I say the right thing, then take your time and say the right thing. Don't try and be something that you aren't naturally good at, because ultimately, if you can demonstrate that quality, and that's a quality that they think is going to go well in that team, then they're going to hire you over you trying to be somebody that you aren't. So absolutely just be yourself, and remember that this is an interview in the reverse sense as well.
And a lot of people, when it comes to the confidence thing and the nervous thing, there's two things I like to remember as well. First of all, most interviewers, unless they're like really unreasonable people, most interviewers are going to accept that you're going to be nervous, regardless of whether you're really confident or not. They're going to accept that there's going to be some nerves involved in an interview. So that's something to bear in mind, is that most people are humans, and they will allow for that. And secondly, the confidence that you can get for these things can come on several little hooks. Like, you can just do a couple of things to make yourself feel confident, because we know that these things work. So the eye contact thing, which is something I was saying about earlier on, is if you're going in there and you've got these things in your mind, like Jen said, they want to interview you. They want to give you this job. It's just about the interview at this point. So you're not there by mistake. You got to let yourself know that this is where I'm supposed to be. I didn't get here by accident. I haven't lied to get here, hopefully. And this is like, so you can bring some confidence in that. But to have a couple of tricks and tips, doing the research on the company will help you feel a little bit confident if something comes up in conversation. But also that ability to repeat people's names, but also maintaining eye contact, is a really good way to gain control of an interview. And I don't mean that in an aggressive way, but keeping control of an interview and keeping yourself confident by making sure that you are going around the people that you're interviewing with, even if it's just one person, trying to make, you don't stare them out, but at the same time, try to keep as much eye contact as possible. It's called the attention bubble, and it's about keeping that person interested and keeping their attention on you. If they're looking out, if you're looking around, they'll look around and forget what you're saying. But if you're maintaining that eye contact, that will help you to have that confidence, to know that they are listening to you and that this is all going well. So that's something I think is really important.
Perfect. Okay, so we've just got a few minutes left, and we've got a couple questions around pre-recorded interviews, and we were going to talk about online tips anyway, so we'll just jump into that. A quick question just came in there about dress code. So just as a note, Dale has kind of mentioned this already, but I would say there's never going to be a problem if you dress up for an interview. So always dress your best, even if you're applying to a company that I worked for a CEO who he used to insist on wearing shorts during his interviews when he was conducting them, and I used to make him change when I was working in HR. So always dress up for an interview, even if you know that the business is casual. You always want to put your best foot forward. You can adjust your dress code to suit the business once you've joined, but in order to get the job, definitely dress as professionally as you can. And that goes for online as well as face-to-face. If you are doing an online interview, don't cheat and wear shorts on the bottom and dress nicely on the top, right? Dress properly the whole way through, because if you dress properly, shoes to tie, girls, even put the heels on, right? If you want to, or if you're comfortable wearing them, go and walk around the room, because that will give you confidence. It's all about having those power poses. And if you dress like you deserve that job, going into an interview, you'll be so much more confident than if you're just wearing comfortable clothes, and you'll feel like you deserve it. So that would be the dress code one. And then maybe we'll just get quickly into sort of pre-recorded videos. So Dale, do you have any tips along those lines?
Well, certainly for the online side of things, like if we're looking at videos where we're like, video interviews, I would say one thing that is really important is don't have notes next to you. I interview prepped a guy the other day from NCI, and he was going through his answers, and it was a little bit stunted and blah, blah, blah. And I deliberately asked him something that he would probably know the answer to, but would never have prepared for it. And when he was able to give that answer, he flowed. He did really well. And I said to him, if I were to ask you about the funniest moment you had in school, would you need notes to tell me about it? And the answer is obviously no. And this is what the thing is. If you start trying to follow notes of something that you already know, like this is experience that you know, and generally speaking, if you've prepped yourself and you know your CV, you know what they're going to possibly ask you about your CV, you're going to know how to explain what happened because you did it. So I would say do not have notes next to you when you're doing an online interview, because you're gonna put yourself off trying to follow it. You'll look down. You don't want to be looking down, so you're trying to do it surreptitiously. You'll mess it up. Just remember, these are your experiences. You know these stories. You've probably told these stories in a pub or over a lunch break with somebody. So trust yourself to get it right. Trust yourself to know your own story, and make sure that when you're doing the online thing, you don't have any notes next to you except the little sticker that says smile, relax, and make good eye contact up near camera.
Absolutely. So we just have a couple of minutes. So I'll just talk about two things really quickly. So on the sort of pre-recorded interview, so usually these sessions, the companies tend to only ask like maybe 3 to 5 different questions. So what I would say in terms of preparing is make sure that, similar to a real live interview, that you know the answer to why do you want to work here? Why do you want this job? Why do you want to work for this company? Why have you applied for the marketing stream versus the HR stream, for instance, right? So simple things like that. Tell me a little bit about yourself. These are all answers that you should have ready to go for any interview. Those are motivational questions, and those definitely do come up on those pre-recorded interview situations. The other ones to prepare for then are usually competency questions. And in the competency questions, you'll usually be able to figure out what competency they're looking for by just reading their job specs and trying to work out, well, what skill set do they seem to emphasize a lot, or what's really important to this company? And often they're things like resilience, communication, or teamwork. So I would definitely think about answers to those. And then when you're going into it, a nice little acronym that we like to use is called TAPE. So going back to that idea of effectively communicating, tone of voice is really, really important. So even if you aren't 100% sure about the way your answer is going to go, even if they've given you a bit of time to think about it, think about your tone of voice, think about your appearance, how you engage with the camera, think about your posture, that you're sitting up straight, right? That you're not like slouched back and sitting against the couch. Don't sit in bed. Definitely do not do these in your bedroom. And then contribute to it, be engaged, and look like you've put in effort in terms of preparing for the interview, that you know what the job is, you know who you are, that you've read through your CV, and that you're putting everything you have into actually completing the video call. So don't, even if you're struggling, try not to drop off of it until the time is done, right? Take a break, take a second to think about it, and then start again and keep talking, and be confident about who you are, and just give the example the best that you can. Okay, perfect. I think that's everything. Dale, are there any last kind of like words of advice, I suppose, in terms of like a key tip in terms of preparing or going through an online interview?
I think there's a thing to remember is don't worry about the underconfidence. Don't worry, like confidence is a myth anyway. Most people pretend at being confident until they become confident. So just fake it. Pretend that you are confident, and sooner or later you'll end up being confident in these sort of things. It's not quite as straightforward as that, but we've only got seconds here. But a lot of that is just understanding that everybody that goes into these things are nervous. Everybody that is hosting these things knows that people are nervous. And you should certainly know that if you've done the preparation for this, if you've tried your best, then you should be able to go in there knowing that you belong there. That's where you should be right now, and they want you there. So take confidence in that. Take confidence in your techniques and your research and your preparation for it, and you should be fine.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, well, look, thank you everybody so much. So again, my name is Jennifer Kwan, and I'm here with Dale Ayres. If you'd like to ask us any questions, I think both of us will be in the CV clinics later on, so you can find us through NCI and check us out with our career conversation things on LinkedIn later on. Okay, great. Thank you.
Bye.